Distinguished colleagues, my name is Abamoro. I represent the very good people of the Benue South Senatorial District, and by the grace of God and your support, the minority leader of this Senate. Mr. President, I want to make a few comments on the 2025 budget as presented by our President, His Excellency President Ahmed Bola Tinubu, GCFR. Yesterday, on the 18th of December 2024. Mr. President, looking at the budget as presented yesterday by Mr. President, we want to believe that if judiciously and effectively implemented, that Nigeria would be making a move in the right direction. But Mr. President, looking back at the 2024 budget and the level of implementation and the key elements that have been brought out by this presentation, there is cause for caution. Mr. President, the provisions for defense looks good on its face, and hopefully with proper timelines on the execution of the security arrangement contained herein, we want to believe that the issue of insecurity will become a thing of the past. And if that happens, Mr. President, I want to believe that all other things are likely to fall in place. But Mr. President, as I have always insisted, the United Nations Education Fund had postulated that 26% of every nation's budget should be devoted to education. Mr. President, Nigeria is far from meeting this standard. And if you go around our educational institutions, especially at the level of primary and secondary, our institutions are in serious states of disrepair that requires urgent repairs if our education foundation must be given the necessary impetus to grow. And so, Mr. President, I think that the provision for education in this budget also requires some review. Mr. President, today, the level of inflation, the cost of food items in the market, certainly is a story for everybody to tell in Nigeria. And so an inflation rate of 34.6%, certainly, Mr. President, is unacceptable. And while efforts are being made to raise or reduce the inflation rate, Mr. President, I still think that 15% inflation rate is still on the high side. Mr. President, the major problem of the Nigerian economy today is the ratio of the dollar to the naira. And so today, we're exchanging the naira for the dollar at 1,700. This rate definitely cannot grow this economy. If you go to any market now, the market woman that sells tomato talks about exchange rate. If you want to go and buy pepper, they talk about exchange rate. If you want to go and buy chicken, they talk about exchange rate. So exchange rate now becomes a standard of transaction, even though we are transacting in naira. And so, Mr. President, I think more effort should be made. 1,500 naira that is expected to be the exchange rate anticipated and encapsulated in this budget certainly is unacceptable. And so, Mr. President, I think again that needs to be looked into. Mr. President, the oil benchmark has been set. We all have seen it in our medium-term framework. I hope sincerely that we try to meet the standard so that we don't run into further deficit. And so finally, Mr. President, foreign exchange inflows. You will recall, Mr. President, that in some of our discussions in this chamber, we had said that because of our situation, generally, the insecurity, the exchange rate, all and all, that our investors are not forthcoming. And so I hope that if Mr. President keeps to his word and the budget works properly, we hope that energy provision will be seriously improved and our environment, especially security, improves, and we'll be able to see the light at the end of the tunnel in the present inflow of foreign investment that the government is anticipating. So all in all, Mr. President, I, as usual, would want to support the general principle of this budget, but also remember that in implementation, in the details, certain concerns that are raised here are addressed. I thank you, Mr. President, for the opportunity.
The Chief Whip